The studio lights of Family Feud burned bright on that October afternoon in 2024, illuminating what would become one of the most talked-about moments in game show history. Steve Harvey stood at center stage, his signature suit perfectly pressed, ready to host what he thought would be another routine episode. Two families had gathered to compete for the grand prize, but what was about to unfold would stop the taping, silence the audience, and reveal a truth that nobody saw coming. The Martinez family from Houston faced off against the Chen family from Seattle. Both teams brought energy and excitement, but there was something unusual in the air that day. Jennifer Martinez, a 38-year-old teacher, stood nervously beside her husband David, a successful corporate attorney. Their teenage children flanked them on either side, creating what looked like the perfect American family. But appearances can be deceiving, and within minutes, the whole world would see exactly what had been hidden behind closed doors. Before we dive into what happened next, if you appreciate real stories about courage and standing up for what is right, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel because we bring you the most powerful moments from Family Feud that you will not see anywhere else. Jennifer had been married to David for 15 years. She had met him in college when she was studying education, and he was preparing for law school. Back then, David had been charming and attentive, always making her feel special and valued. They had built what everyone around them thought was an ideal life together. David's law career had flourished, bringing financial security and social status. Jennifer had dedicated herself to teaching middle school English while raising their two children, Emma, who was 14, and Lucas, who was 12. To neighbors and friends, they represented success and stability. But behind the closed doors of their suburban home, a different reality existed. Over the years, David had slowly changed. The charm that once made Jennifer feel special had transformed into something darker. He had begun criticizing everything she did, from how she cooked dinner to how she dressed for school functions. His comments were never made in public, only in private where nobody else could hear. He would tell her that she was lucky to have him, that no other man would want someone who had let herself go after having children. He controlled the family finances completely, giving Jennifer an allowance like she was a child rather than his equal partner. When she tried to discuss opening her own bank account, he had laughed and told her that she did not understand money matters. The psychological abuse had been systematic and deliberate. David never raised his voice in front of others. He saved his cruel words for moments when they were alone. He would undermine her parenting decisions in front of the children, making her look incompetent. He criticized her teaching career, suggesting that she was wasting her time with a job that paid so little. When Jennifer's mother had passed away 6 months earlier, David had refused to take time off work for the funeral, saying his cases were more important. He had made Jennifer feel small and worthless, eroding her confidence bit by bit over the years. The Family Feud appearance had been David's idea. His law firm had connections with the show's producers, and he had arranged for their family to be selected as contestants. Jennifer had been hesitant, but David insisted. He told her it would be good for the family, a chance to show everyone how perfect they were together. What Jennifer did not know was that David saw this as another opportunity to demonstrate his control, to show the world that he was the head of the household and that Jennifer existed only to support him. On the day of the taping, Jennifer had chosen a simple blue dress that she thought looked nice. David had immediately criticized her choice in the car ride to the studio, telling her she looked frumpy and asking why she could not have made more effort. Their children sat silently in the backseat, having learned long ago not to intervene when their father started his verbal attacks. Jennifer had changed into a different outfit in the studio bathroom, a burgundy blouse and black pants that she hoped would meet David's approval. When she emerged, he had simply nodded, which she had learned to interpret as the closest thing to praise she would receive. The game began normally enough. Steve Harvey introduced both families with his characteristic warmth and humor. Martinez family won the coin toss and chose to play first. The category appeared on the board, and Steve read the question with his usual enthusiasm. Name something that makes a good marriage work. It was a straightforward question, the kind that Family Feud had asked countless times before. David buzzed in quickly, his competitive nature taking over. Communication, he announced confidently. Steve nodded, and the board revealed that communication was indeed the #1 answer with 42 points. The audience applauded, and David's chest puffed out with pride. He high-fived his children and turned to look at Jennifer with an expression that seemed friendly to observers but that she recognized as smugness. The family continued to play. Emma suggested trust, which earned them 28 points. Lucas said respect, adding another 18 points to their total. They had 2 strikes when it came back around to Jennifer. She stood at the podium, her hands shaking slightly as she held the microphone. Steve looked at her kindly, sensing her nervousness. "Take your time," he said gently. "What do you think makes a good marriage work?" Jennifer thought about her own marriage. She thought about the 15 years of walking on eggshells, of trying to be perfect enough to avoid David's criticism, of losing herself in the process of trying to please someone who could never be pleased. She took a deep breath and said quietly, "Financial independence." The answer was unexpected. Steve's eyebrows raised slightly, and there was a murmur from the audience. The board did not reveal that answer. Strike three. The Martinez family had lost their chance, and the other family would now have an opportunity to steal. David's reaction was immediate and explosive. As the family gathered together for the Chen family's chance to steal, he grabbed Jennifer's arm roughly and pulled her slightly away from the others. His voice was low but harsh, meant only for her ears but picked up clearly by her microphone, which was still on. "That was the stupidest answer I have ever heard. Financial independence. Are you trying to embarrass me on national television? You just cost us the game because you cannot think of one decent answer. This is exactly why I handle all the important decisions in our family. You are useless." The words hit Jennifer like physical blows, but something was different this time. Maybe it was being outside the walls of their home. Maybe it was the presence of cameras and witnesses. Maybe it was simply that after 15 years she had finally had enough. Jennifer's voice, which had been quiet and uncertain moments before, suddenly found strength. She stepped back from David, pulling her arm free from his grip. Her eyes, which had been downcast, lifted to meet his. She spoke clearly, her voice carrying across the studio. "No, David, I am not useless. What is useless is a marriage where one person is treated like property instead of a partner. What is useless is spending 15 years trying to be good enough for someone who will never see your worth. What is useless is pretending to the world that we have a perfect family when behind closed doors you make me feel worthless every single day." The studio fell completely silent. Even the crew members who had been preparing to continue the game stopped what they were doing. Steve Harvey, a man who had seen countless moments of drama and emotion on his show, stood frozen. David's face went red, a mixture of shock and rage. "How dare you," he started to say. But Steve Harvey stepped forward, placing himself physically between David and Jennifer. His voice, usually full of warmth and humor, was deadly serious. "Now hold on. Let's stop right here." He turned to address the studio audience and the cameras. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to pause the game for a moment because something more important than any game show is happening right now." Steve looked directly at David, and his expression was unlike anything most viewers had ever seen from the usually jovial host. "Sir, I have been married. I have been through my own struggles in relationships. I have made mistakes and learned from them. But one thing I know for certain is that no man, and I mean no man, has the right to speak to his wife the way you just did. You think nobody noticed? You think we could not hear what you said to her? Those microphones pick up everything." Steve continued, his voice firm but controlled. "You grabbed your wife's arm. You called her stupid and useless on national television. And I am willing to bet that this is not the first time you have treated her this way." Jennifer stood there, tears streaming down her face, but she was not crying from weakness. These were tears of release, of finally being seen and heard. Steve turned to her, his expression softening. "Ma'am, what is your name?" "Jennifer," she whispered. "Jennifer," Steve said gently, "I want you to know something. That answer you gave, financial independence, that was not a stupid answer. In fact, that might have been the most honest answer anyone has ever given on this show. You know why? Because you were not answering what makes a good marriage work. You were answering what you needed to survive a bad one." The audience, which had been silent, began to applaud. It started with a few people and then grew into a standing ovation. Jennifer's daughter Emma ran to her mother's side, wrapping her arms around her. Her son Lucas followed, and the three of them stood together while David stood alone, his face a mask of fury and humiliation. Steve was not finished. He addressed David again. "Sir, I do not know your whole story. I do not know what made you think it was okay to treat your wife this way. But what I do know is that right now, on this stage, you have a choice. You can recognize that what you have been doing is wrong, that controlling and belittling your wife is abuse, and you can get help to change. Or you can continue down this path and lose everything that actually matters." David's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. He looked around the studio, seeing the expressions of disgust and disappointment on the faces of strangers. For perhaps the first time in years, he saw himself as others saw him. The mask of the successful attorney and perfect husband had been ripped away, revealing the insecure bully underneath. Steve then did something unprecedented. He turned to the show's producers who were standing off stage. "Stop the taping. This family needs help, not a game show." He looked back at Jennifer and her children. "Ma'am, my team is going to connect you with resources. Counseling services, legal assistance if you need it, financial advisors. Whatever you need to figure out your next steps, we are going to help make it happen. Jennifer nodded, unable to speak through her tears. Her daughter held her tighter. Her son looked at his father with a mixture of anger and disappointment that David had never seen before. Steve addressed the audience one more time. Folks, we sometimes forget that the people who come on this show are not just contestants. They are real people with real lives and real problems. What we just witnessed was a woman finding the courage to speak her truth. That is more important than any game or prize money. The audience applauded again, many people wiping away their own tears. What happened next unfolded over the following weeks and months. The Family Feud episode never aired as planned. Instead, Steve Harvey worked with Jennifer and his production team to document what happened next in a way that would help others in similar situations. David was escorted from the studio by security. Jennifer, Emma, and Lucas were taken to a private area where they met with counselors and advocates. For the first time, Jennifer told her complete story to people who listened without judgment, who believed her, who validated her experience. The children also spoke about what they had witnessed growing up, the tension in their home, the fear of upsetting their father, the way they had learned to make themselves small and quiet to avoid conflict. In the days that followed, Jennifer made the hardest decision of her life. She filed for divorce. David's law firm partners, who had seen clips of what happened at the taping, quietly suggested he take a leave of absence. His professional reputation, which he had valued above all else, took a serious hit when word spread about his behavior. Jennifer moved with her children into a modest apartment. For the first time in 15 years, she opened her own bank account. She enrolled in a financial literacy course and started learning about managing money, something David had always insisted she was too incompetent to understand. She discovered that she was perfectly capable of handling finances, that his control had been about power, not protection. Steve Harvey kept his promise. He connected Jennifer with a therapist who specialized in domestic abuse recovery. He arranged for her to meet with an attorney who took her case pro bono. Most importantly, he gave Jennifer a platform to share her story. 3 months after that fateful day in the studio, Family Feud aired a special episode. Instead of the usual game format, it was a conversation between Steve and Jennifer about financial abuse, emotional manipulation, and the courage it takes to leave. Jennifer sat across from Steve, looking stronger and more confident than she had on that October day. She wore the same burgundy blouse she had changed into that day, a reminder of where she had been and how far she had come. The conversation was raw and honest. Jennifer explained the slow erosion of her self-worth, how David had systematically isolated her from friends and family, how he had made her doubt her own thoughts and feelings. She talked about the shame she had felt, the belief that if she could just be better then he would treat her better, the gradual realization that nothing she did would ever be good enough because the problem was not with her. Steve listened intently, occasionally asking questions but mostly letting Jennifer speak. He shared his own reflections on relationships, on the difference between being a leader in your family and being a dictator, on how real strength lies in lifting your partner up rather than tearing them down. The special episode included experts who explained the signs of financial abuse and emotional manipulation. They provided resources for viewers who might be in similar situations. The response was overwhelming. Within hours of the episode airing, the show received thousands of messages from people sharing their own stories. Many said that Jennifer's courage had inspired them to seek help or leave abusive relationships. Some were from men who recognized their own controlling behaviors and wanted to change. The episode went viral on social media. Clips of Steve's intervention were shared millions of times. People praised him for using his platform to address domestic abuse, for not just moving on with the show, but recognizing that what was happening was more important than entertainment. Jennifer's life began to rebuild in ways she had never imagined possible. Her school district, moved by her story, promoted her to a curriculum development position with a significant salary increase. She thrived in the new role, her creativity and insights finally given space to flourish. Her children began their own therapy, processing the years of witnessing abuse and learning healthy relationship patterns. Emma started a support group at her high school for teens from troubled homes. Lucas became an advocate for teaching emotional intelligence in schools. Both children watched their mother's transformation with pride and relief. 6 months after leaving David, Jennifer did something she had not done in years. She went on a date. It was terrifying and awkward, but it was also her choice. The man was kind and patient, but Jennifer was not ready for a serious relationship yet. She needed time to remember who she was without someone trying to control her. She took dance classes, joined a book club, traveled to places David had always said were not worth visiting. She discovered that she loved hiking and photography, hobbies she had never had time or permission to explore before. 1 year after that day at Family Feud, Jennifer returned to the show. This time she came alone, not as a contestant, but as Steve's guest for another special episode. The transformation was remarkable. She carried herself with confidence and peace. Her smile reached her eyes in a way it never had before. Steve welcomed her back with a warm embrace. "Tell us," he said, "how are you really doing?" Jennifer smiled. "I am doing more than okay. I am actually happy." You know, that day when I gave that answer about financial independence, I did not realize it at the time, but I was already starting to break free. My subconscious knew what I needed even if I was not ready to admit it consciously. She continued, "Financial independence was not just about having my own bank account, though that was important. It was about having the independence to make my own choices, to trust my own judgment, to build my own life. That is what I have been doing this past year." Steve nodded. "And David? What happened with him?" Jennifer took a deep breath. "David went through court-ordered therapy as part of our divorce proceedings. I have heard through mutual acquaintances that he is working on himself, trying to understand why he felt the need to control me. I hope he does change, not for my sake because I have moved on, but for his own peace and for any future relationships he might have." Steve leaned forward. "What would you say to someone watching right now who is in a situation like the one you were in?" Jennifer looked directly into the camera. "I would say that if someone makes you feel small, if someone controls your access to money or makes you ask permission for basic things, if someone criticizes you constantly or makes you doubt your own worth, that is not love. Real love builds you up. Real partnership involves respect and trust. And I would say that leaving is not failure. Staying and trying to fix someone who does not want to change is what will break you." She continued, "I know it is scary. I know there are practical concerns about money and housing and children. But there are resources available. There are people who will help. And I promise you that the fear of leaving is nothing compared to the peace you will feel once you are free." The audience gave her a standing ovation. Many people were crying, moved by her strength and honesty. Steve stood and hugged Jennifer again. "You know what you are?" he said. "You are proof that it is never too late to reclaim your life." Before we end today's story, if Jennifer's courage inspired you and you believe that everyone deserves to be treated with respect and dignity, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel because we share stories that matter and voices that need to be heard. The impact of Jennifer's story rippled far beyond that single episode. Domestic violence organizations reported significant increases in calls to their hotlines in the weeks following the special episodes. Many callers specifically mentioned Jennifer's story as the catalyst that gave them courage to reach out. Schools began incorporating discussions about healthy relationships into their curricula, using clips from the Family Feud episode as teaching tools. Financial institutions developed programs specifically designed to help people leaving abusive relationships establish independent credit and banking relationships. The legal community took notice as well. Bar associations began requiring continuing education on recognizing signs of abuse in clients and ethical obligations when representing someone engaged in financial or emotional abuse. David's former law firm implemented new policies about character and ethics expectations for partners. Jennifer herself became an unexpected advocate. She worked with organizations that supported domestic violence survivors, sharing her story at events and fundraisers. She helped develop financial literacy workshops specifically designed for people leaving abusive relationships. She trained therapists and social workers on recognizing financial abuse. Her children grew up seeing their mother not as a victim, but as a survivor who turned her pain into purpose. Steve Harvey often reflected on that day in interviews. He said it reminded him that television could be more than entertainment, that sometimes a platform brings responsibility to speak truth and offer help. He incorporated more discussions about healthy relationships into his various shows and projects. The Family Feud staff received training on recognizing signs of abuse and protocols for offering resources when needed. As for Jennifer, she eventually did find love again. 3 years after leaving David, she met a teacher at a professional development conference. He was kind, respected her independence, celebrated her strengths, and supported her work as an advocate. They dated for 2 years before getting married in a small ceremony surrounded by friends and family. Her children walked her down the aisle, proud of the woman their mother had become. On her wedding day, Jennifer wore a bracelet that Steve Harvey had given her after that first special episode. It was engraved with a simple phrase: financial independence, emotional freedom. It served as a reminder of the answer that had changed her life, the moment when she had accidentally told the truth and discovered that the truth could set her free. The story of what happened at Family Feud that October day became legend. It was studied in sociology classes as an example of how abuse can hide behind a facade of success. It was referenced in therapy sessions by counselors helping clients recognize unhealthy relationship patterns. It was shared by friends trying to help friends see their own situations clearly. Years later, people still talked about the moment when Steve Harvey stopped a game show to stop abuse. They remembered how he had used his platform not for ratings but for change. They talked about Jennifer's courage and her transformation. But most importantly, they talked about the lesson that resonated across every demographic and every situation. That no game, no money, no appearance of success is worth sacrificing your dignity and self-worth. Jennifer often said that she was grateful for that day, even though it had been one of the most difficult moments of her life. Standing on that stage and finally speaking her truth had been terrifying, but it had also been liberating. She had walked into that studio as a woman who had lost herself in trying to please someone unpleasable. She had walked out as a woman beginning to remember who she was and who she could become. The answer she had given that day, financial independence, had seemed wrong at the time. The board did not light up. Her husband had berated her for it. But in the end, it had been the most right answer she had ever given. It had been the answer that led her to freedom, that gave her children a model of strength, that helped countless others find their own courage to leave unhealthy situations. Steve Harvey summed it up best in a later interview. Sometimes the perfect answer is not the one that wins the game. Sometimes the perfect answer is the one that changes your life. Jennifer gave both that day, even if she did not realize it at first. Her answer about financial independence lost them the game but won her back her life. And that is what I call a perfect score. The story serves as a powerful reminder that abuse does not always look like physical violence. It can be financial control, emotional manipulation, constant criticism, and systematic erosion of self-worth. It reminds us that perfect-looking families can hide painful realities. It shows us that courage can appear in unexpected moments, that speaking truth can be revolutionary, and that it is never too late to reclaim your life. Jennifer's journey from that October day to her current life of peace and purpose demonstrates that healing is possible, that happiness is achievable, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is admit that something is wrong and ask for help. Her story continues to inspire, educate, and empower people around the world to recognize abuse, leave dangerous situations, and build lives defined by freedom rather than fear. The legacy of that Family Feud episode extends beyond Jennifer's personal transformation. It changed how game shows approach contestant welfare. It sparked national conversations about financial abuse. It provided a roadmap for others trapped in similar situations. It proved that sometimes entertainment platforms can become forces for social change. And it all started with one woman finding the courage to give an honest answer to a simple question, and one man choosing to stop the show to start a conversation that needed to happen. That is the real story behind the viral clips and the headlines. That is what happened when a husband slammed his wife on stage, and Steve Harvey's response left not just her, but millions of viewers speechless with its power, compassion, and commitment to doing what was right over what was easy.